overseas, Iran says it will start to enrich uranium up to 20% and will do so as soon as possible. Mark Meredith is looking into the details of this new development and what it means for the U.S. Mark.
Griff, good afternoon. Sunday marks 1 year since a U.S. airstrike killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. And as that anniversary nears, national security officials, they are closely watching Iran, looking for any possible signs of retaliation. And over the last several weeks, the Pentagon had sent additional resources into the Persian Gulf in an apparent effort to deter any aggression from Iran. For example, 2 B-52 bombers, they recently wrapped up a 30-hour mission into the region. But late Thursday, the Pentagon made a surprise announcement that the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz is coming home, wrapping up a nearly 10-month-long deployment, a potential signal to Iran that tensions can be de-escalated. Meantime, as you mentioned, Iran says it plans to enrich more uranium up to 20% purity at its Fordow nuclear facility, Iran making its decision known to the UN nuclear watchdog agency. This as Iran's foreign minister issued a fresh warning to President Trump today on Twitter. He urged the president not to fall for a, quote, trap while accusing Israel of trying to provoke war by targeting U.S. troops in Iraq. President Trump, he has repeatedly urged Iran to think twice before any military or nuclear escalation. You may remember right before Christmas, he said he would hold Iran responsible for any attacks on U.S. personnel in Iraq. That was after that attack in Baghdad's Green Zone that U.S. officials believe Iranian-backed militants were responsible for. Now, the administration says next week, Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf, he'll be heading the road going to the Middle East. He's expected to meet with officials in Cyprus, Bahrain, and Qatar.
Will Nancy Pelosi be reelected as Speaker and do so on the first ballot when the 117th Congress convenes on Sunday? This is a big if, and it's not as easy as it sounds, not by a long shot. Remember, she has to get half the votes of those present that day, and it's not as easy as you think. No one can vote by proxy. 2 Democrats are quarantining themselves for the COVID virus. In addition, 2 others have publicly announced that under no circumstances will they vote to re-elect Speaker Pelosi. Last time, 10 Democrats deserted the lady with the gavel, and she held on. That's because Democrats had a big edge in Congress. Now, the split between the parties is the closest it has been since 1958. And again, the magic figure is 216. That's half of those who are going to be present on Sunday. If she does not get that amount, then it goes to a second ballot. All sources on Capitol Hill agree. If the Speaker doesn't win on the first ballot, she will get out on the second because there's nowhere to go but down. And in that case, it's anyone's game. Hakeem Jeffries, the chairman of the House Democratic Conference, long tipped as the eventual successor to Speaker Pelosi, may make his move then. And with Republicans united behind their leader, Kevin McCarthy of California, it's not inconceivable that there could be a Republican speaker, at least for a couple of months. So get a ringside seat for this Sunday. It's going to be exciting.
Well, in a new report from the National Pulse, an expose has been released regarding the China-U.S. Exchange Foundation, CUSES. Now, this was funded by the vice chairman of the Chinese Political Consultative Conference. This is a main Communist Party CCP organ in China. It was later identified as a component of the Chinese Communist Party's United Work Front, their information operations around the world. According to the U.S. government, this report aims to co-opt and neutralize sources of potential opposition to the policies and authorities of its ruling Chinese Communist Party and, quote, influence overseas Chinese communities, foreign governments, and other actors to take actions or adopt positions supportive of Beijing's preferred policies. The National Pulse discovered that the CCP was paying for national media key figures to come to China on familiarization trips. This included recruiting top journalists to travel to China, selected for their effectiveness and opportunities for favorable coverage. I think you'll recognize some of the names: The New York Times, The Atlantic, Huffington Post, Boston Globe, Boston Herald, Slate, Vox, NPR, CNBC, Newsweek, the LA Times, the Baltimore Sun, the Chicago Tribune, the Guardian, the New Yorker, the Financial Times, Foreign Policy, the Philadelphia Inquirer, New York Magazine, the Washington Post. The list goes on and on. In addition to this travel, many of the organizations also had paid dinners from the CCP. These often took place in New York, Washington, D.C., and Chicago, according to FARA filings. What isn't said in the filings is what was said on these trips and at these dinners, and what the media companies offered in return. And another question is, why was the CCP inviting them again and again to these dinners and on multiple trips? After all, they said it was for favorable coverage.
By the way, the stuff we had, we didn't pick out just the shout-outs for the show and for yours truly. In the opening segment, we get more to Maricopa County. It's like an 8-minute video. We're going to give a shout-out to everybody who's out there in Maricopa County. You changed direction of history. You got people quitting, people resigning. You've got the Attorney General has not had anybody's back, now jumping into the amicus brief. Every day, you're taking another bite. Now, last thing before we get to Ian Smith. Dr. Guan in the last episode. Here is a work assignment. When the deplorables, when you out there, because you're the smartest audience, you buy more books, we're making things bestseller. This is about the Great Reset versus the Great Awakening. This is Build Back Better, their plan, no conspiracy. They've laid it out all over the world. The Great Reset versus the Great Awakening. This is what the exclusive interview with Archbishop Vigano is on Monday. But when this audience can be as articulate and has a deep understanding as Dr. Guan, someone that had to leave mainland China and come here to the West, right? And actually undercover came and come forward. When that happens, when you can be as articulate about the geopolitical situation and about freedom and about the civilizational, there's not the civilization between the Chinese people and the American people. This is about putting forward freedom, freedom, freedom for the people of the world. Remember, only the Chinese people can get their freedom. We are simply here to assist, right? And that's why we're so honored to have so many of the Lao Beijing, the whistleblower movement, the new federal state. Much more about the new federal state. This thing is really picking up momentum, getting people from all over the world to join, including many Westerners in these countries. They're to help. Okay, I want to turn now. In 2021, I had to have Rudy on, on the first show, had to have Boris on, had to have Liz Ure on, but I really had to bring this guy back, Ian Smith. Ian, you're one of the most controversial guys up in Jersey, and that's saying something, okay? But I want to leave the controversy aside because you actually speak. I want to go to the signal, not the noise of Ian. I know you're fighting political battles every day, but you have this concept of one of the central problems in the Judeo-Christian West, and we had some Chinese women on here a week ago said, no. Ian's actually talking about a bigger problem about males on a global basis. What's the problem, and what should people focus on in 2021 to do? You got about 4.5 minutes. Just let it rip.
So everything that we're seeing, politically and throughout our society and throughout the globe, and this tailspin that the world kind of seems to be in, I think, is the result of men not being men. Our society has gotten a little too comfortable and has gotten a little too far away from the traditional values and the traditional roles of men in society. And as a man, I think it's important that you start looking around at the landscape and being really honest with yourself moving forward into 2021. The world as we know it is changing rapidly in front of us. And it is your duty as a man, no matter who you are, to make sure that change is the best change possible for your loved ones, for yourself, for your community, and for your country as a whole. And what you're seeing right now is the result of a long game being played out, weakening men around the world. When men are weak, governments and institutions and power structures do as they please because there is nobody to stand firm against them. I first started. So
how do they? Do you have a website? Do you have a website? Do you have information? How can guys start to wake up from this, particularly the younger generation, the under 30s, the under 40s that maybe are not the original gangsters like some of us?
There's a lot of stuff out there. It does start to need to get centralized. And there's a lot of us kind of talking about creating a bigger movement between the combination of a lot of people's ideas. What I would recommend is for any guy who's starting to look around and question how he can help and how he can change the world, start by reading. There's a book that I would recommend every man in society today to read from young to old, and that is The Way of Men by Jack Donovan. It's a fantastic book. Jack is a phenomenal writer, very politically incorrect, and these books were written about 10 years ago, and they couldn't be more accurate for the time. And then start initiating yourself with men that are actually making a difference. You look around your social circle, and if the men in your social circle are not making a difference in the world around them, then you may need to find some new friends, and they're out there. Use social media. Look up people like Ryan Mitchler, like Andy Frisella, like Jack Donovan. These men are starting to lead the way in a resurgence in traditional masculinity.
We're gonna have you back on next week. This is gonna be a big deal of us. We're also gonna have something for the ladies on this topic. So we're gonna be driving some. We're not really have gotten much into the cultural stuff here on War Room because we've been so with impeachment and the pandemic and geopolitics, but we're going to get to the signal part of that, not the noise, all in 2021. That's what we're going to have.
我们昨天替美国解决了大问题，这个孙子天天讲上帝，天天给这捐款那捐款，给某个你们最喜欢的大律师拿了25万的支票。你过去这1个多月，从11月3号到现在，这个最牛的律师就是因为这个人给了25万的支票，听了他100%的假信息，天天叭，总统都差点上当。最后总统说：“离远点，离远点。”他还好相信了爆料革命，他没用他的信息，他用的信息，这个美国完蛋了，真搞戒严啊！共产党，你以为共产党说就以为光影响你当总统吗？他还想啥了？他想你美国死，想让你美国乱，给你这些信息，你搞戒严吗？一搞戒严，美国完蛋了啊！兄弟姐妹们，千万别拿咱普通人的些想法来看一个国家权力机器的运作。一个国家机器的运作的流氓性、危险性、凶险性，是你在电影都看不到的不是开玩笑的，兄弟姐妹们。所以说，兄弟姐妹们，啥都是假的兄弟姐妹战友们是真的，事实是真的，永不可改变。看一个人，别听他说什么，你看他做了什么。
川普发推，全美国选票的数量超过投票人很多，绝不允许这种滑稽继续存在。这一场被操纵的大选，第三世界的国家都不会这样。川普发推抨击福克斯，观看福克斯新闻几乎和观看假新闻媒体 CNN 一样糟糕。新的替代媒体正在产生。评，难道是暗指 GTV、G News？川普发推抨击推特，推特在史无前例的秘密屏蔽言论，而我们懦弱和无能的政客们却拿这些大的科技公司没办法，这是一种耻辱。他们要么胆小，要么愚蠢，没人知道答案。严丽梦博士发推，很荣幸当选班农战斗史年度女性，年度男性获得者是朱莉安妮。蓬佩奥发推声援被捕的香港12名人士，被捕的12名香港义士不能保释，不能选择律师，不能见家人。从这件事可以清晰地预见到，在一国一制集权统治下失去保护后的香港未来的司法状况。纳马罗发推评价刚刚签署的中欧贸易协议，与中共沆瀣一气的欧洲正在没落，中共杀死了数百万人。由中共政府控制的自媒体开始撰文，将沈阳疫情大爆发责任甩锅给回国的尹老太。2020年12月31日晚 世卫组织正式通报，新冠病毒自出现以来的主要变异情况包括4种变体。关于美军2艘驱逐舰穿航台湾海峡，外交部回应坚决反对。中共国防部称，驻香港部队是维护香港繁荣稳定的定海神针。中共国防部称，与印度双方就推动举行第9轮军长级会谈进行协商。2020年12月31日，通辽市疾病预防控制中心收到协查函，2名密切接触者乘坐不同日期航班从北京返回内蒙古。刘强东于2020年期间卸任200余家公司高管。中共军方正在加紧研发单兵自毁装置，从过去的战场都战远到如今的自毁控制，中共一直在研究如何控制军队。2020年12月30日，大连金州区玉龙湾社区出现一例确诊，小区单元楼被加焊，小区所有人居家隔离21天。
现在坐地铁看到没？不让一起进，5分钟进40个人，班排老的人了，这家伙，马路对面也是。
辽宁沈阳市全员核酸检测，人太多，管控员能力不足，造成踩踏及打架事件。
一是明确9类重点人群接种疫苗。根据国家整体部署，2021年春节前，为涉及进口冷链物品的口岸一线海关检验检疫人员、口岸装卸搬运运输等相关人员、国际和国内交通运输从业人员、因公因私出国学习工作人员、面临较高境外疫情风险的边境口岸工作人员、医疗卫生人员、政府机关、公安、武警、消防、社区工作者、物品、水电、暖、煤气相关人员、交通、物流、养老、环卫、殡葬、通信相关工作人员，共9类重点人群以及其他应急保障人员。
沈阳市铁西区全民分时分批进行免费核酸采样检测，要求保持1米社交距离。辽宁疫情失控，继大连、沈阳31日，鞍山也出现疫情，居民开始抢购食品物资。知情网友暴露，铁西区现多例确诊病例。置地新城一洗浴中心服务员确诊，洗浴中心和附近市场已经封闭，官媒暂无报道。
搁浴室出来的肯定都给隔离了，都上车了。
随着国产航母山东舰，
解放军在三亚基地新增大型干船坞，新航母或永久驻扎。
我南部展区三亚某综合防长基地扩建情况。日前，美国海军协会新闻网报道称，美国战略与国际问题研究中心公布的商业卫星图显示，中国正在扩建海南三亚某海军综合防长基地。该基地的海军航空兵设施得到了扩建，同时施工数年的2座大型干船坞已接近完工。
另外，据乌克兰总统办公室网站30号发布的消息，乌卫生部与中国科兴控股生物技术有限公司签署了新冠疫苗采购合同，中方将向乌方提供191万剂科兴公司生产的新冠疫苗。
在除夕8度寒风下，在太子手持保存12灯牌，表达对12港人的支持；手持白色百合花，表达对831的悼念。寒风萧瑟，香港勇士岳义士身着单薄衬衫，于今日刑满出狱。在香港沦陷区，绽放港共对反抗勇士的镇压升级。
战友们啊，
这是一场人类上前所未有的话语权、信仰和宗教、经济和政治、人性和道德一场彻底的大转变，无人可以挡，只是谁来改变。你扮演了什么角色，谁都挡不了，这就是时代。
我们真正是感受到了爆料革命这些东西深入咱们战友每个家庭、每个生命的每个部分，都是一家一家的支持爆料革命。爆料革命成了很多战友生命中不可缺少的，而且是五湖四海。而且我真也没想到，世界上原来这么多战友支持我。无处不在，没有任何国家，没有任何地方，非洲的、南美洲的、亚洲的、东欧的、北欧的、西欧的，那北美洲就不用说了。
全人类真正的开始了一个从来想都不敢想，就是要消灭共产党。因为他杀了全世界人，这个仇多大？谁想送回去？永远不可能，没有一个人敢谈。
我发现他中国人真是憋的时间太长，这个力量太大了。集结真正的力量，准备着没有互联网的新中国，我们每个人要扮演的角色。
灭共没你不行。